In motion is Sewell. Goff to throw. Wants to throw it to Sewell. He caught it. Boy, Sewell with a first down. Oh, yes. The big man dives down to the 31-yard line. Oh, that is beautiful.
Welcome to the Twentyman Huddle podcast presented by Microsoft, and I am happy to welcome in David Corrao, the defensive assistant, outside linebackers coach for the Detroit Lions. And David, I want to start with this because I've been kind of excited to have you on. And again, I think this has been a great platform to have some of the assistant coaches on. Kind of, we don't get a chance to talk to you guys a whole lot and just get a chance to see what you guys are about and, how you kind of fit into the grand scheme of the coaching staff. But one thing, you were the former director of football research here. I've always been curious what that job entails. So Monday on a work week, what is put on your desk? What is the director of research? Is this highly classified? Can you talk about this?
No, it's for a coaching staff and an operation that's not here anymore.
Yeah.
I think the simplest way to describe it was I worked with both sides of the football, but I didn't work for either side. Okay. So I had certain responsibilities. So one of the things that Matt had asked me to do was, because of my defensive background, was put together the presentation to meet with the quarterbacks. So we would go over the other team's secondary, the strengths, the weaknesses of the DBs, any type of coverage issues or tells or weaknesses. And I would put together a presentation. I would meet with Matt.
Yeah.
And then we would go in and make that presentation to the quarterbacks. Then defensively, I worked with Al Golden for 2 years, helped coach the outside guys, the defensive ends. And then on game day, I did personnel for the defense, helped do the adjustments and the changes. It was just during the week, the way we scripted practice. I had responsibilities working with Bevel. I mean, it was a designed position to kind of do what they need me to do and not draw a lot of attention to it.
Now you're back coaching outside linebackers. Do you like having the guys being in that room again?
It's not, well, what happens is what we're doing is there's a bridge, right? We have certain guys on our team that, depending upon what we're in, they could be defensive ends, they could be outside linebackers.
James Houston, great example.
Right. So what I do is I work with Shep. Shep puts the structure together. And so because what those guys do on the end of the line of scrimmage can be so unique, you have to have somebody that focuses on that because it takes away from the inside guys. But then there's times when they're going to be in the D-line room. And so it's a group where they're kind of caught in between. And if you don't have somebody whose job it is to make sure those guys know what to do, things can get lost.
James Houston, Julian Okwara, anybody else? Charles Harris.
You'll see sometimes in the past we had Anthony Pittman doing that. He's more inside backer now. And then we'll have certain personnel packages where the guys from the D-line room will come to be outside linebackers like Hutch, like Romeo, so like Zach Morton.
Right.
And again, there's just certain unique things that those guys have to do that if you don't have somebody focusing on that, it's going to get lost in the shuffle.
Speaking of a guy like James Houston, what's the big emphasis, the point of emphasis for him going into his second season? Dave, we see all the time players take that huge jump from year one to year two. Everybody talks about that being a real thing. What's been the point of emphasis for James as it relates to you and Shep's kind of teaching points for him and also when he goes to the D-line as well?
I would say emphasis on attention to detail. He can't just roll out there and kind of fly by the seat of his pants. It's all for him. It's all about making sure my eyes are in the right place, making sure I'm stepping with the right foot, using my hands properly, all those little things that now he's not a surprise. People know who he is. And so they're going to have a plan for him. They're going to have ways to counter the things that he's put on film. So he's got to be ready to react to that. And that just comes down to fundamentals and technique.
Yeah.
So
does he have the skill set to play a bigger role in this, not be a specialized third down guy? Everybody talks about wanting to be a 3-down player. Does he have that skill set? We obviously have seen what he can do on the edge, rushing the quarterback a little bit. We saw it against Chicago, maybe playing in space. Does he have that skill set to do multiple things?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at his background, he was an inside linebacker. So some of that coverage stuff is natural and instinctive to him. I think he does, but he's just like the rest of them. It's all about the competition, and the guys that show the most consistency, the most reliability, that are doing things the way that they're coached to do it, and we can count on them. Shep likes to say, I like to have the guys that I can just close my eyes and put them out there, and I know they know they're going to have to do. Well, he's going to have to be subject to that as well.
Is Charles Harris an important guy to that room in that aspect? Because he seems to me like a guy from the outside in that always knows where to be, what to do, a veteran presence, a guy who's done it at a high level in this league before. Obviously was a first round pick, didn't work out in Atlanta, but got his opportunity here, found the right spot for him. He wasn't a hand in the dirt guy. He was a stand up outside linebacker. And so how good is it to have a guy like that in that room for young guys like James and Hutch when he's in that room, and some of the other guys?
Charles is a tremendous veteran leadership presence. He does things the right way. His attention to detail, the way he comes to practice, the way he brings what he does to the game, to me, Charles not a very outspoken guy. He's not going to tell a lot of people, yell and tell the guys what to do. But what we find ourselves constantly doing is pointing to what he's doing and telling the guys, just look, if you want to know what it looks like. And an old defense coordinator I used to work for, we used to talk about, you have to know what it looks like. If you want to do things the right way, you got to know what they look like. And Charles is the guy that we find ourselves repeatedly over and over pointing to him as that's the example of what we want it to look like.
Good to have him back, have him healthy.
A healthy Charles Harris is going to make us a much better defense.
I mean, people forget he was a 7.5 sack guy just a couple years ago. And so, getting him back, and he can do a lot of different things. You brought up Shep, and it's such an interesting dynamic between you two, because you were in Miami on the coaching staff there when he was a player. And so you coached him, and that was his finest season probably. That was a 100-tackle season for him. And then you watch him turn to coaching. You guys are, kind of reunited, and you two work closely in that linebacker room. Just how interesting of a dynamic is that, and how much have you enjoyed watching Shep grow as a coach?
Right. He and I have a very unique relationship because of the length of time, but also because we both come from very similar backgrounds in how linebackers are coached and how you expect them to play and the things that you demand, the drills we refer back to all the time. We were very fortunate to work. The linebacker coach in Miami at the time was Mark Duffner. He and I will constantly refer him back to, okay, when Duff did this, and so that is a dynamic that I've never been a part of. I've been with him for 2 years in Miami. He came here in 2018. I was working in the linebacker room with Al. He comes in 2018. And then when he showed up here, you just always knew when he was a player, he had that player's mentality, that toughness, that leadership, but you always knew in the back of your mind, like, this guy's going to coach too. Like, he can coach because he was the guy out there making sure everybody was lined up. He didn't want to hear anybody else making the calls. Like, I got this. It's like a quarterback out there. And, so for me to watch him going into year 3 of being a position coach and walk in the door, take a room, and at the end of the day, the guys that play for him produce. They show up on Sundays. He knows how to get them to do what they need to do. And I mean, I learned things from him because as a former player, I get to see things through his eyes, and that teaches me. And here I am 14 years into this league, still learning from a guy that's, 10, 12 years younger than me. And it actually makes me a better coach by working with him, so I can see things how a player would see them.
Seems like a fun room.
It is. It's a fun room because it's very structured. It's very organized. We know exactly what we got to get done. We come in, we get our work done. The guys making sure, we talk about it all the time. We're not going to ask you to do something if we haven't covered it in a meeting, if we haven't drilled it, and the players have ultimate faith that what they're being prepared for is what they're going to see. And that's why, because the guy, there's no questions or ifs, ands, or buts about anything that we're doing. So they go out there and they get to play with supreme confidence. It starts with Shep. That's the culture he's built in the room.
Yeah. I'm curious. It was almost like a tale of two seasons defensively for you guys last year. Obviously, the first 7 games was what it was. Over 32 points per game, ranked last in the NFL. But I don't think a lot of people realize that number dipped all the way down to, I think, a little bit over 20 the last 10 games, which was 11th best in the NFL. In your eyes, what was the biggest difference you saw from the first half of the season to the second half of the season? Can you put your finger on it, or is it multiple things?
I think it's multiple things. I think it's a constantly evolving process, right? What you're doing in week 1 shouldn't be what you're doing in week 17, 18. You should be identifying the things that you're good at, the things that you're having trouble with. I think AG did a tremendous job of identifying the changes that needed to be made schematically, personnel. Like you just said, it wasn't just, hey, we fixed this and that's what got us better. I think it was a menu of different things, and I just felt like we were more coordinated from front all the way through the back end. Guys were, the D-line, the linebackers, the DBs started to fit together better. Everybody understood we're all on the same page. We're playing a certain way. And, stats are stats. I've been around enough like teams that are struggling to have winning. Like, I look at it as, I don't care about the stats. Defensively, I thought the best improvement that we made over the course of those last 10 games is we played defense well enough to put ourselves in position to win games, because that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
It's not to have, stats are good. Like that usually is a reflection of success in the wins and losses and on the scoreboard. But at the end of the day, you just got to find a way to have your team get one more point than the team you're playing, and then we move on to the next game.
Looking at those last 10 games, do you see the recipe there that you can now take that into this season? Did you have a good offseason, in your opinion? You guys on track to kind of be a more consistent defense overall? Yeah,
I think like there were a couple times you're out there on the field in OTAs and you're watching who we got out there, guys running around, and you're like, okay, this is what, again, this is what it's supposed to look like.
Right.
If you don't know what if you don't know what it looks like, how do you know when you have it? And you start to look out there, and some of the guys that we brought in the offseason, some of those draft picks, and you're looking out there and you're like, okay, this looks like a highly competitive, we're going to be fighting to play important big games in late December and into January, which is why we're here. And it feels, I think the structure AG put in place, the position coaches getting their guys ready to go, and I think you see it in the players when they're out there. There's a little bit more of a swagger. I think
100%.
You still got to go out and you still got to do everything the right way, but they kind of starting to get this like, okay,
yeah,
maybe we got it here a little bit. And
you've got to love to see that as a coach, and guys like CJ Gardner-Johnson, right, who've done it at a high level, who kind of bring that energy. How much do you guys in your room talk about the improvements of the secondary and what that might mean for them? Because you look at guys like CJ Gardner-Johnson, Mosley, Cam Sutton, you're getting Tracy back. He only played 3 games last year, but that looks to be vastly improved unit, and obviously will affect what you guys do in your room. Is that talked about at all? Is it alluded to? Is it
you can't help but notice it.
Yeah.
But in terms of sitting around talking about it, we got a lot of stuff that we got to worry about in our own room. You can't be, you start worrying about things that, the old phrase, do your job.
Yeah.
Like, do your job. Like, and then we'll worry about everything else. But at the end of the day, you can't help but notice it. But in terms of, do we sit around and have conversations about it? No. I mean, like, we got our own stuff to worry about.
Julian Okwara, it seems like a pretty important season for him heading into his 4th season. Obviously the athletic traits, everything is there. The production, we've seen it in stretches, maybe not as consistent as we maybe can see. How important of a season is this for him? And what do you like about his game? How does it fit into this defense? And what does he got to do to be a more consistently productive player moving forward?
I think Julian is as gifted an edge player as you'll find around in this game. Like, he can do things and get himself in and out of situations that a lot of other players just don't have the God-given talent to do. He's got to fight the same battle that every player has to fight. Doing it the right way, doing it the way he's coached, doing it with maximum effort, and doing it every play. You can't have those stretches where you do it right for 3 or 4 plays, and then there's that 5th play where you don't do it right. And again, that makes him, he's no different than anybody else we have. And I'm excited to see Julian. I think he's had as good an offseason as he's had, no injuries, no little the things that have been an issue for him. Correct.
Injuries have been a big issue.
Have you really seen, that stretch in 2021, the first year where he was healthy and he was playing and he was doing a lot of good
5
things.
sacks, I think, that season in a short period of time.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's the guy I hope we're going to get. And for his sake, he needs to go out and play well, and that'll be what's best for his career and long-term development. And so, like I said, he's in the same bucket as the rest of them, whether it's James, Charles, Hutch, all these guys, they're competing.
Yeah.
And I think the history of our team is the guys that do it the right way, and the coaches have the best guy's going to play, and they don't really care where you came from.
Nope, not at all. I mean, Malcolm Rodriguez is a great example last year, getting first snaps as a 6th round draft pick. Do you like the competition in that room? Because from the outside looking, it looks like a pretty deep edge outside linebacker group. Do you like the versatility and the depth that you got in that room heading into training camp?
I do. I think there's a good foundation there, and competition is what you're always striving to get. You don't want to have a room where 1 or 2 guys know there's nobody else in this room that can take my job.
Right.
There's a certain amount of you have to have I don't want to call it fear, but like a motivation to where you can't take a play off, because that might open the door for the guy behind you to come in and get a rep, and then you might not get your job back. And so I always look at it as competition always helps the team, because either it forces the guys on the top level to play better, or the guys on the bottom level play better than the guys on the top level. But either way, our team gets better.
What's the quote? Competition breeds success, right? 100%. I think every coach would agree with that. Aidan Hutchinson, you mentioned he kind of splits time a little bit, does some stuff. We saw last year when he drops and plays in space, how he can, have an impact and make plays. What have you seen from him in his second season? We talked to him a couple of weeks ago, and he said it was great to have an off season where I could just focus on my body, watch tape and see my deficiencies and work on that. It's not the underwear Olympics where I'm training for the 40 and stuff like that. Just the expectations in the building from a guy who works with him for his second season, and how much improved have you seen him this year versus where he was last year?
We'll go back to what you brought up before, right? The biggest jump sometimes are between year 1 and year 2. Well, why is that? Because in preparation for year 1, what are they doing? They're combine training, they're pro day working, and then they show up in late May, early May, and they get 6 weeks to get ready in an off-season program. Well, now these second year guys, they've been football training since the end of the season.
Yeah.
That's why you see that, he there's a confidence there now. You see Hutch goes out there, there's really he's progressed to the point where you're not focusing on, and this is where you want to be, right? You don't want to spend all day on where do I line up and what do I do? You want that to just be automatic.
Right.
Now we get to spend, once you've got that experienced confidence that I know what I got to do and I know where I got to do it from, now you get to spend more time on how do I do it? And that's what, that's about fundamentals and technique. Less alignment and assignment, more fundamentals and technique. And that's when you see players truly develop.
Yeah.
When they're not worried about what to do. Nah, that's not an issue.
Yeah.
Now I'm just focused. My eyes are on my key and I'm playing. I'm worried about my hands, my feet, and I'm just, where's the ball? Go get the ball. That's when you see players play fast.
Yeah.
And that's what they talk about. The game slows down because they start to play so much faster.
We saw a big jump with him, and credit to AG for identifying kind of what a player wanted last year in terms of he wanted to stand up, maybe play from the 2-point stance a little bit more. Said he saw the field a little bit more. Did he come to you? How much did you guys collaborate a little bit as an outside linebackers coach? Obviously, in terms of technique and stuff like that, that's what a lot of your guys do. Did you work with him a little bit in that regard? And if so, Hutch, the classroom guy, the technician, how much do you marvel at that guy?
Well, I look at it as what they're doing now, what we've the process evolved over the course of the season last year and into this offseason, where when you're on the end of the line of scrimmage, you're playing what you play, whether you're being taught through the D-line room, because in this package you're a D lineman,
right,
or you're an outside linebacker in this package and you're being taught in the outside linebacker room. What we do on the end of the line of scrimmage is the same no matter what it is. Last year there were a couple variations that,
so if he was playing D-line, it would be absolutely a different technique, a different whatever.
I don't want to make it sound like it's dramatically different, but there were little nuances.
Sure.
And this year, no. end of the line of scrimmage is the end of the line of scrimmage, and that's what we're doing. And I think it helps the players because now they're not worried about, okay, what package am I in? Am I doing it as an outside linebacker? Am I doing it as a defensive end? It's the same. And I think that's why you see Hutch, Romeo, like these guys, they're playing faster. They're just, they're taking the thought out of the game, which is the goal of the coach, right? You want your players out there. Speed and violence will overcome a lot of things on defense. And that's I think the goal of what we're trying to do is streamline this thing down. Let these guys get lined up and play fast, and good things will happen.
Speed, violence, is that the identity that you want this defense to be?
I hope so. I mean, come on, the way that the rule book is constantly slanted towards the offense. Good. That makes people watch the game. So what do we do on defense to create an advantage for ourselves? Well, our speed, our violence, our aggressiveness, our ability to put the offense back on their heels. That's the only advantage we have. We don't get a rules advantage, right? You can't touch a receiver past 5 yards. Okay, so how do you disrupt the receiver once he gets past 5 yards? Pressure the quarterback.
Yeah.
And all those things have to be married together for us to take advantage. And that starts with speed, violence, aggressiveness, pursuit to the ball, that type of stuff.
I think 5 rookies at one point last year were making considerable contributions on defense the second half of the season. We talked about the additions that the veteran guys that were added in free agency and even guys like Jack and Brian and Broderick in the draft. I'm just curious, do you like where this defense is at just heading into training camp? Those guys got a lot of experience. You've added those vet guys. It just seems like you're in a good spot with a good mix of veteran guys, young guys that have experience. It just seems like all the right pieces are kind of falling into place. Obviously, you've got to see it with pads, and they'll decide that on the field. But as a coach looking at it, do you think you got the right pieces to make a considerable improvement on that side of the football?
I hope so. I mean, I see bigger people up front. Like that's the first and foremost that I like. You look out there. I always look at football as a big man's game, especially up front. Bringing in those young defensive linemen. Those guys are giants.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we're still running around in shirts and t-shirts and shorts. And so it's like, I've been doing this long enough that I try not to make judgments
in the
until
spring.
we put the pads.
Yeah. It can be hard sometimes, probably. Huh?
It is. Well, what happens is there's certain things you want to see that are like I go through, me personally, again, like I'm not the final decision maker, but like for my level of confidence in what we're doing, like I have certain little checks, like, okay, that's good. Okay, we didn't do that maybe, and that's maybe a cause for concern. And those are the things that I kind of make mental notes on. But at the end of the day, I want to see it out there when, shoulder pads, helmets. I think one of the greatest things that the teams in the NFL have started to do around the league is the practicing for 2 or 3 days when the other teams come here and we go there.
100%.
Like you get to see, like that to me was like my first experience with that. We never once did that. My entire 8 years in Miami, we never did that.
Really?
And so when Matt did that, when we got here, and then that was interesting. So you asked what I did. About research. Every day I would have a little sticky on my desk with a name from the other team, and they would want me to evaluate that guy. And there was a second name on the sticky, compare A to B on our team, and it was a great way. It's how we found Romeo. Right, if you remember that. That's how we found Romeo.
Really?
When the Giants came here, Romeo was very disruptive at practice. And when the Giants cut Romeo at the final cuts, Bob swooped in and said, okay, we'll take that guy.
Yeah.
What do you have, 8 sacks for us to first? He became one of our productive players. So
had a 10 sack season.
You get those evaluations of your own guys and then exposure to the other guys. You get a apples to apples comparison in practice.
Sure.
Watching our starters go against their starters. And then the second benefit of that is the young players who don't get as many reps in practice because the vets and the top end guys don't play nearly as much, if at all, in the game.
Right.
You get 35 extra plays when you're a young guy. Okay, can this kid handle it? So that's the stuff I really like that stuff.
And as a coach, you've got to love. There's certain situations that might not come up in a game, in a preseason game too. That you want to see a guy. What can he do in this situation? Third and whatever. This call. You might not get to that in the preseason game. And so in the joint practice, it's a very controlled environment, and you can put guys in all kinds of situations that you want to see them in. Coaches nowadays say they get more out of those practices than they do the preseason games. 100%. Yeah.
Perfect example. You rarely bring goal line to the preseason.
Right.
Because you might not, you like to check off the people. We go down to Indy last year. There's a period of goal line in practice, so we're going to find out. Okay, who's going to nut up on the 2-yard line, and that violent collision when and it goes back to what Derek Barnes had the great hit against Green Bay, stopped the running back from Green Bay right there, stoned him on the 1-yard line.
Yeah.
Like Derek did that in preseason against that type of play showed up in the practice against Indy. So those
you
to
can
me,
see it, how it translates.
That's an invaluable experience, man. That stuff is big time.
And you get 2 of them this year. You got Jacksonville and Giants, right?
Plus, it breaks the monotony of I think our players get tired of running into their teammates.
100%.
Like that's the big one too. Right?
There's some juice in those practices too. There's some trash talking they can have, and with guys like CJ and Trace and those guys, it should be a fun environment.
Well, they have. I think they have what I think it is. They all have professional pride. They don't ever want to look bad.
Yeah.
Because that one play might be what they fixate on and say, okay, we got to move on from this guy. And so they bring their A game, especially when there's a guy in a different uniform lined up on a crossroom. They don't ever want to look bad. And I've always respected that about like that's like young players, rookies, have to learn that. But when you watch those multi-year vet guys, those experienced veterans, they know.
A couple more for you, Dave. Do you get a sense that the guys on defense are hungry?
I think so. I think in last year, totally different team. 100%. But there's a mentality and a culture, and I think they got so close, And I just put it from my own perspective. When we were home during vacation, if their guys felt anything like me, I was out to dinner with the family, and they had the Giants and the Vikings on the TV, and I had to turn my back to the TV.
Yeah,
I couldn't watch it. It was like, that should be us.
Right.
And so hopefully that's the hunger that these guys that come back. We bring the new guys that they see how the guys that come back. That to me is we need to be in this year. I want to go. I
think fans want to see you guys go too.
I like our team because we're tough. We make you play a brand of football that a lot of teams in this league don't like to play. And I think that comes from Dan, and the head coach sets a culture around here that we do things like, all right, here you go. You're in for it when you play us. So
I hear you go into your office, you see quite a few superheroes around. So Marvel, DC, first off, and who's your favorite guy?
I always like the Marvel thing. I'm total Marvel movie comic book dork. I get it. My kids are in on it too. They like it.
That's great.
We watch the movies together. I think in our house the big one is Iron Man.
Okay.
We were big Tony Stark fans. Like all the Iron Man. Can't get enough of that. And then just all of it's really good. It's such good entertainment. You go to a movie, check your brain at the door. And in there for a couple hours, you smile, you laugh, you get pumped up.
I think your kids are drawn superhero guys, and you've got some of that stuff up in your office and everything.
That.
And
my kid, every time I go home, my younger daughter Shay will have, "Daddy, I drew this for you," or "Daddy, I wrote this for you." And I came home, they came up here for a home game, and they walk in the house and they got the little stuffed Black Panther. "Daddy, we found this at the airport," and I'm like, and they love it, so I put it up all over, artwork, stuff like that. Just keeps it light and just reminds me that, got a family that cares and they love football too.
That's an important part of, because you coaches spend so much time here, especially during the season. How important is it to have that balance? And how much can that make you a better football coach too, having that home work life balance?
The home work life balance is really hard. That's the hardest thing. There's just not enough time in the day. And there's a number of coaches on our staff that are like me. We've got a little bit of different setup. My wife and kids live in Naples, Florida, and that's where they live full time. So in the off season, I'll go there back and forth. During the season, they'll come up for home games, and it makes me feel better because that's their permanent space. we got into a certain kind of thing where my younger daughter didn't go to the same school for 2, 3, 4 years in a row. And it was like, all right, we got to get some stability here. And the homework balance, like for me, is more about stability. It's like, I know now my kids are going to be in the same schools for a while. They're going to have the same friends for a while. I don't want their life to ride the roller coaster of success and failure and coaching. And to them, it doesn't I try not to let it affect them. Yeah. You don't bring the office home. Like after a game, we win, great. Everybody's happy. But if we don't, like at the end of the day, the girls don't care. They want time with dad. And it's like, can't beat that.
You can't beat that. And it's going to be such a fun training camp, a lot of competition, especially in your room, a lot of competition throughout this entire roster. And like we said before, competition breeds success, a lot of expectations for this defense. You can play a part in that. Thank you so much for joining me. It's going to be fun when training camp kicks off. And thanks for taking the time. Appreciate
it. Thank you for having me.